What's up, Vetters? Patrick here with Vetted. Have y'all ever heard of someone named Dr. John Brandenburg? Well, if you haven't, today you're going to learn about him. Because in a recent episode of the Jesse Michels show on YouTube, otherwise known as American Alchemy, Jesse sat down with Dr. John Brandenburg and discussed some things I think you're going to want to hear about.
I'm here with Dr. John Brandenburg, and it's an absolute honor to have him. You first popped up because I did a piece on Townsend Brown, and my audience has heard me talk about Townsend Brown ad nauseum. He's this mid-century inventor who I think did some interesting things in the world of gravity, possibly helping marry gravity and electromagnetism from an experimental standpoint.
Yes.
Maybe not in the strongest theoretician. And then all of a sudden there's all this Twitter noise about this guy, John Brandenburg, who has his own model, gem theory.
Gem theory.
Gravity electromagnetism, is that right?
Just gravity electromagnetism.
And then more recently, I've started to get interested in kind of Mars anomalies, which have gone kind of viral. Like Joe Rogan recently retweeted my buddy Chris Ramsey, who posted this photo that's now been verified at the highest levels of this sort of square structure on Mars that looks artificial, but that's of a long lineage, as you know, of seemingly artificial structures on Mars, and you're about as deep as anybody on that topic.
Yes.
And so it's just an absolute honor to have you, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, Jesse, it's a pleasure and honor to be on your show.
Now, before we jump into some of the highlights of this interview that Jesse did with Dr. John Brandenburg, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Brandenburg. Dr. John Brandenburg is an American plasma physicist known for his work in theoretical plasma physics, space propulsion, and Mars research. He earned his PhD from the University of California, Davis, with studies conducted at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Brandenburg has held positions at various high-tech institutions, including Sandia National Laboratories and Orbital Technologies, contributing to projects like the Microwave Electrothermal Thruster, the MET, which uses water as a propellant. He is also recognized for his controversial hypothesis suggesting evidence of a past thermonuclear event on Mars, possibly linked to an ancient civilization, detailed in books like Death on Mars. Additionally, he has explored unifying gravity and electromagnetism through his GEM, gravity electromagnetism theory, aiming to advance space propulsion technologies. Brandenburg blends mainstream science with speculative ideas, making him a polarizing figure in the scientific community. Now that we've learned a little bit more about Dr. John Brandenburg's background, let's learn a little bit more about Dr. John Brandenburg's work.
They kind of made fun of me as the Mars guy, and then suddenly Carl Sagan is trying to get a hold of me all the time. And so I go to my office, and here's Carl Sagan on the phone. And I said, well, Carl, what'd you think of the pictures? He says, I never got them. And we both had this long moment of silence. I said, okay, here's the frame number. Here's the long lat. Here's the, I'm going to fax you a copy right now. Just give me a fax number. I'll fax it to you. And that's what we did in those days before the internet. And he said, thank you. And he called me back later and said, this isn't as big as the first one. I said, yeah, it's about 2/3 the size. He says, but yeah, it's very interesting. He says, it's very interesting. And
that was it?
And that was it. That was it. And then they changed the name of the region from being just Utopia to Galaxis Chaos. And I realized...
What's the significance of that?
Well, chaos means kind of cliffy ground. So it was kind of a technical description, but it was apparent that I'd thrown somebody's galaxy into chaos by finding this second face of Mars that looked like the first face of Cydonia. Wow. And now it's been confirmed. It is another face. By this point, we knew we'd found a dead civilization on Mars.
Yep.
So that's an interesting story you just told about Carl Sagan, right? In these photos, these very famous photos, in fact, of this face on Mars specifically, right? I mean, what do y'all see here? Does this look like a face? I mean, it does, right? But does that mean what exactly, right? What's interesting about the photo itself is taken in 1976, that original one, but then we actually sent probes back to take further pictures of that exact same spot, once in 1998, and then later on in 2001, right? And then you can see all the pictures here, right, kind of laid out in order. And the clearer and more sharper image you get, the more that face kind of goes away, right? Here's kind of side by side here. Now, I don't know, right? There's other things on there that are quite extraordinary about Mars. Let's hear what that photo did for Dr. John Brandenburg, because he made many more alleged discoveries about Mars.
I will be very honest with you. When we found the second face, we also found shots of the first face in Viking pictures showing it illuminated at morning, so you could see that it was symmetrical, right and left. And then I'd found and digested the isotopic evidence. And when it all kind of sitting in my office, it all hit me. I wept like a child for about 4 minutes.
Why?
Because they were all dead. It looked like a thermonuclear holocaust and had happened there. And we were so afraid it would happen on Earth, working at Sandia Labs. And I just was just overcome with grief. After a few minutes, I said, get a hold of yourself. I said, get a hold of yourself, get a grip, And I said, don't be sad, be happy. Because now you know. Now you know. The universe has no safety net. Bad things can happen in the universe, and make sure they don't happen here. So I became very, very dedicated at that point to see that we have a human mission to Mars, boots on the ground, to find out exactly what happened on Mars, to make sure it doesn't happen here. That's my focus.
I mean, honestly, whether you believe there was an ancient civilization or not, or there was a thermonuclear war or blast on Mars, whether there was life there, whatever, whether that's a face on Mars or not, honestly, it doesn't really matter, because I can stand behind what Dr. John Brandenburg just said, right? We're going to send people to Mars and look around and find out. Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we dig some stuff up? I mean, if we truly start to dig on Mars, I think we'll uncover some things we may not be prepared for.
Isn't one popular theory, even in, again, conventional circles, that Mars had a magnetosphere?
Yes,
and that
did.
allowed for water to
Yes.
exist and stuff, and that its magnetosphere was somehow stripped?
Well, Mars is only half the size of Earth. It has about 1/8 the mass of Earth. What that means is its core would have cooled off quicker, and the molten core is what allows the liquid iron dynamo that generates the magnetic field on Earth to exist. So Mars may have just run out of gas, but
Okay, so the magnetosphere just died out.
it just died out.
And that wasn't, so you think they had actually extincted themselves before that or after
I
that?
think
They were
so.
unrelated?
I think so. I think Mars
And
had
for the audience, the magnetosphere would allow a biosphere to exist.
Yes,
would allow water, but also possibly life. And
well, and it's, as they're finding out at Chernobyl, by the way, life can thrive in areas with a lot of radiation. It just mutates faster.
yes.
And so accelerated evolution on Mars may have proceeded after the magnetosphere died. But there's other things going on. Mars looked like it had a dense atmosphere with a nice greenhouse going. On Mars, greenhouse effect was not a bad word. It helped Mars to have Earth-like temperatures, even though it's farther from the sun. And what happened then was suddenly all that was gone. Some cataclysm, what looks like a thermonuclear holocaust, blew most of the atmosphere off into space. So it's only got a thin, tenuous atmosphere left, and it leaked all its heat. And a planetary greenhouse traps heat. So even the core stays hotter.
And what's interesting, to sort of back up a little bit of what Dr. John Brandenburg is saying, right? The idea that life can survive, okay, under the most, precarious situations, right? And unpredictably. And to help send that message home, most recently, at the beginning of this year, and it's now just being reported, a fascinating discovery was made in Antarctica.
In January, a giant piece of ice broke off from an Antarctic ice shelf, revealing an ecosystem on the seafloor that has never been accessible to humans. What scientists found was both stunning and surprising, proving that life exists under astonishing conditions.
Now, I made a longer video about this. I'll put a link in the description. Please check that out. This discovery in Antarctica, there's so much more to that story, and I go over it and what it means actually for just the UFO topic in general, and just the idea that we're not alone. You'll understand. A link in the description. Please go check that out. Now, back to this interview with Dr. John Brandenburg. Another discovery that he, alleges to have made about Mars, okay, and life existing there before, right? Check this out.
Wasn't there a meteorite found in Alaska as well in the 90s that Clinton then spoke about publicly?
Actually, it was found in Antarctica, and that was
Antarctica.
ALH 8401.
Uh-huh.
There's a certain type of meteorite called CI, carbonaceous chondrites. They're basically old lake bottom from some planet.
And this meteorite was from Mars?
Yes,
we know.
And that was a
from
piece of lava, but it had a vein of carbonate inside, limestone, and it was full of organic matter. And
it looked like bacterial.
And it looked like bacterial
structure.
fossils in there.
Yeah.
I found their evidence to be rather convincing, but they were attacked viciously.
We have archaeological structures on
Yes.
Mars that seem to imply that water existed at the very least.
Oh, yes.
We have, conventional astronomers saying, there was probably a magnetosphere back in the
Yes.
day, and that would allow for a biosphere.
Yes, it would.
And then you have these artificial.
You don't even need, there could be water in the ocean, life in the oceans without even it being on land, and it would survive the radiation because the seawater stops all the radiation.
Right. And then you have artificial structures.
Yes.
And then you have Carl Sagan calling you saying, why are you making all this trouble? So seems like a decent amount of evidence that at the very least, this is worthy of further investigation. And, maybe we should move our probability from 0% life on Mars to much higher than that.
I think the data has received,
and then you have the isotope.
has achieved critical mass now.
And you have the isotopes, which are really like which nobody can explain, the xenon 129 and the argon 40.
So I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you think about this idea that, was there life on Mars? Was there this catastrophic thermonuclear blast that, eliminated, eviscerated, annihilated this ancient civilization? And do we have evidence of this past life, this past event, right? What do you think of Dr. John Brandenburg's work? I'll put a link in the description to the full interview. Please check it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. All right, vetters, we'll see you in the next video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.